All right, so are you ready to dive into a question that has fascinated pretty much everyone?
I'm ready.
Was the Cold War inevitable? We're talking decades of tension between the U.S. and the Soviet Union.
Right.
Global chess match with nuclear stakes.
Yeah,
This is the kind of stuff that makes international relations so fascinating,
absolutely.
especially for those UPSC aspirants out there.
Yeah.
And we've got three major perspectives to unpack,
Three perspectives.
each one giving us a different lens to look at this historical standoff.
Each one shedding light on the different forces at play, you know?
Yeah.
Power, ideology, even human miscalculation.
Right.
It's not about finding the quote-unquote right answer.
Yep.
It's about understanding these different interpretations.
Okay.
So you can use them to analyze international
I
relations.
like that.
Past and present.
Yeah, using those tools.
Exactly.
Let's start with a perspective that's all about power dynamics.
Okay.
So imagine a world emerging from World War II.
Right.
Major players like Germany and Japan are out.
Right.
Even the traditional powerhouses, the UK and France, are weakened.
Mm-hmm.
This creates a massive power vacuum, right?
Absolutely. And into that vacuum, step two superpowers.
Okay.
The United States and the Soviet Union.
Makes sense.
Think of it like a game of chess where there are only two players left on the board.
Right.
The stakes are incredibly high.
High stakes.
Every move is scrutinized, and
Yeah.
the tension
Oh, yeah.
is palpable.
You can cut it with a knife.
Exactly.
Now, this is where realist theory comes in.
Okay.
It argues that nations, just like individuals,
Yeah.
are driven by self-interest
Right.
and a desire for survival.
Self-preservation.
In a world with limited resources, power becomes the key to survival.
Yes.
But wouldn't that mean any two powerful countries are destined for conflict?
Okay.
How does this theory explain times of peace?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Realism doesn't necessarily predict constant conflict,
Okay.
but it does highlight how states prioritize their own security and their own interests. And when those interests clash,
Oh,
conflict becomes much more likely.
right.
And in the case of the Cold War,
Yeah.
the US and the Soviet Union saw each other's actions through a lens of suspicion,
Okay.
interpreting every move as a potential threat.
That makes sense.
The decline of other powers only intensified this dynamic,
Right.
creating what we call a bipolar world order,
Bipolar.
where these two titans were locked in a constant struggle
A struggle for
for dominance.
dominance.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this power dynamic sets the stage.
Right.
But the Cold War wasn't just about military might.
No, it wasn't.
It was also a clash of ideologies.
Yes.
Capitalism versus communism.
Absolutely.
You're right.
The second perspective argues that this ideological battle
Yeah.
was a fundamental driving force behind the Cold War.
Fundamental.
It wasn't just about who had more tanks or bombs.
Right.
It was about two completely different visions
The vision.
for how society should be organized,
Okay.
how wealth should be distributed,
Right.
what the future should look like.
Wow.
It was a battle for the soul of the world.
For the soul of the world.
Yeah.
You've probably heard these terms a million times.
Right.
But what were the real world consequences of these clashing systems?
Yeah.
How did they shape people's daily lives?
Okay.
It's easy to get lost in the abstract ideas.
Yeah.
We're talking about real people living under these systems,
Real people.
feeling the impact of this ideological struggle.
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
On one hand, you had the capitalist West
Yeah.
emphasizing individual freedom, private ownership, and free markets.
Freedom.
It was all about competition, innovation, and the pursuit of profit.
Okay.
On the other hand, you had the communist East,
Right.
advocating for collective ownership,
Mm-hmm.
economic equality,
Okay.
and a classless society.
Classless society.
It emphasized cooperation, shared resources, and the state controlling the means of production.
So these weren't just abstract debates happening in academic halls.
No, they weren't.
They were shaping the lives of millions,
Right,
fueling propaganda,
Yeah.
influencing foreign policy decisions.
Absolutely.
These fundamentally different worldviews set the stage for a conflict
Yeah.
that went far beyond simple power politics.
And remember, this ideological battle wasn't something new
Okay.
that emerged after World War II.
Right.
The tension had been simmering for decades,
Oh, wow.
with the Russian Revolution in 1917 bringing the conflict into sharper focus.
So from this perspective, World War II might have delayed the inevitable confrontation
Yeah.
between these two systems.
It might have.
But it didn't change the underlying ideological forces.
Precisely,
Got
at
it.
play. But hold on, because there's a third perspective that challenges the idea of inevitability altogether.
Oh,
What if, instead of a preordained clash,
Yeah.
the Cold War was a series of tragic misunderstandings?
Okay, now things are getting interesting.
Yeah.
We're moving from a world of grand historical forces to the realm of human error,
That's right.
misperceptions,
Yeah.
and missed opportunities.
This perspective argues that the Cold War might have been avoidable.
Avoidable.
What if both sides simply misread each other's intentions,
Okay.
stumbling into a conflict that neither truly wanted?
So instead of this grand clash of titans,
Yeah.
it's more like a communication breakdown with global consequences.
Right.
That's a pretty unsettling thought.
It is, and there are plenty of examples from history to support this view.
Like what?
Let's start with the West's perception of Soviet intentions in Eastern Europe.
Okay.
The US and its allies viewed the Soviet Union's efforts to establish a sphere of influence in the region
Yeah.
as evidence of an expansionist agenda,
Okay.
a communist plot to dominate the world.
Right, a classic communist plot.
But what if Moscow's motives were less about ideology
Okay.
and more about basic security?
You're saying they weren't trying to spread communism?
Maybe not.
Create a buffer zone?
Yeah,
To protect themselves from future invasions.
exactly. They had been invaded twice through Eastern Europe.
Yeah, that's true.
In just a few decades,
Right.
suffering unimaginable losses.
Horrible.
Their actions could be seen as a desperate attempt
Okay.
to prevent a repeat of those wars.
Right.
But the West, still reeling from the fight against Nazi Germany,
Yeah.
interpreted these defensive moves as aggressive expansionism.
As aggressive expansionism.
It's a classic case of misreading intentions.
And, makes you wonder.
Yeah,
Think about a time you misunderstood someone's intentions.
right.
Now magnify that to a global scale with nuclear weapons involved.
Exactly.
That's the danger of misperceptions in international relations.
Absolutely. And these misperceptions weren't limited to the West.
Okay.
The Soviets, particularly under Stalin,
Yeah.
harbored a deep distrust of the West,
Okay.
rooted in their own historical experiences.
What do you mean?
They remembered the Western powers' intervention in the Russian Civil War,
Right.
the attempts to contain the spread of communism, the
Mm-hmm.
economic isolation they faced.
So much history.
This history fueled a deep-seated paranoia in the Kremlin.
Paranoia.
Yeah.
So even when the U.S. genuinely wanted to decrease military presence in Europe after World War II,
Yeah.
the Soviets saw it as a sign of weakness
Mm-hmm.
or a ploy to lure them into a false sense of security.
Right. They just couldn't believe that the U.S., after such a costly war,
Right.
was genuinely looking to shift its focus to domestic issues.
So the U.S. rapidly decreasing its military presence in Europe was, in their eyes, suspicious.
Very suspicious.
They had been conditioned to see the West as inherently hostile,
Yeah.
regardless of the actual intentions.
It was a tragic cycle of distrust feeding upon itself.
So we have both sides misinterpreting each other's actions,
Yeah.
driven by fear, historical baggage, and a lack of clear communication.
That's right.
It paints a very different picture of how the Cold War began.
It does.
Instead of an inevitable clash, it suggests that perhaps things could have gone differently.
Perhaps.
And that raises a fascinating question.
Let's...
Could better communication, a more nuanced understanding of each other's motivations, have prevented the Cold War?
That's a big question.
It is.
Or were these misperceptions simply symptoms of deeper, unavoidable conflicts?
We'll dive into those questions next.
It's a question historians are still debating.
It really is.
But it highlights the role of perception
Yeah.
and understanding in international relations.
Perception and understanding.
Even when you're dealing with things like military strength or geographic position,
Right.
it's the subjective lens
Yeah.
that can really shape the course of events.
That's so true. It's like they say perception is reality,
right.
especially when you're dealing with global superpowers armed with nuclear weapons.
Exactly.
But okay, we've explored three very different perspectives on the origins of the Cold War.
Three perspectives.
One emphasizing power dynamics,
Yeah.
another highlighting ideological conflict,
Yeah.
and the third focusing on misperceptions and myth calculations.
Miscalculations.
So where does this leave us? How do we make sense of it all?
It seems unlikely that the Cold War was the result of any single factor.
Okay,
It was probably a complex interplay of all three.
all three.
The post-World War II power vacuum definitely played a role,
Right.
creating a situation where the U.S. and Soviet Union were thrust into this global rivalry.
Global rivalry.
Their different ideologies just added fuel to the fire,
Yeah.
turning this geopolitical competition into an ideological struggle.
Wow.
for the soul of the world.
For the soul of the world.
And then, of course, human miscalculations fueled by fear, distrust, and historical baggage.
Right.
They just exacerbated the tensions and made conflict more likely.
So it wasn't just fate.
It wasn't just fate.
It was also a series of human choices and mistakes that led us down that path.
Exactly.
It's a reminder that even seemingly inevitable historical events are often the result of, decisions made, perceptions formed, and opportunities missed.
Absolutely. And that's why understanding these different perspectives is so valuable.
I agree.
Especially for all of you UPSC aspirants out there. It's not about memorizing dates and names.
No.
It's about developing a framework for analyzing international relations.
A framework.
Recognizing the interplay of power, ideology, and human psychology.
Because these same forces are still shaping the world today.
They are.
It's like you're giving us a set of tools to dissect current events.
Right.
To understand the motivations of different actors on the global stage.
Exactly.
We're not just learning about the past.
We're
learning how to think about the present and the future.
Exactly. The Cold War might be over.
It is over.
But the lessons we can learn from it are timeless.
Timeless.
And one of the most important takeaways
What is it?
is the danger of misperceptions and the importance of clear communication.
Clear communication.
Because as we've seen, even small misunderstandings can have huge consequences.
Huge.
Especially when you're dealing with nuclear-armed superpowers.
It makes you wonder what systems or safeguards can we put in place to prevent these misunderstandings from happening again.
Right. Are we doing enough to foster dialogue, build trust, and understand different perspectives?
I know.
Because the stakes are just as high today as they were during the Cold War?
It's not higher.
Perhaps even higher. Those are excellent questions.
They are.
And they lead us to a final thought for this deep dive.
Okay, hit me.
If the Cold War was at least in part a product of its time, a result of those specific historical circumstances and anxieties of the post-World War II era.
Makes sense.
What does that tell us about the potential for conflict today?
That's a great question.
Are we still trapped by old ways of thinking?
Right.
Old fears, old patterns of behavior? Or can we learn from the mistakes of the past and build a future where communication and understanding triumph over distrust and conflict?
I like that.
It's a challenge for sure.
It is.
But understanding history, especially through these multiple lenses we've explored today, is a crucial first step.
It is.
It allows us to see the complexities of international relations.
Right.
The forces at play. And the potential for both conflict and cooperation.
And it equips you as engaged citizens and future policymakers to make more informed decisions.
That's right.
To challenge assumptions.
Right.
And to advocate for a more peaceful and cooperative world.
Well said.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the origins of the Cold War, I'm curious. Which perspective resonates most with you?
That's a good question.
Is it the realist view of power politics as the driving force? Or the clash of ideologies that painted the world in black and white?
All right.
Or maybe the tragic tale of misperceptions and missed opportunities?
It's fascinating to consider, isn't it?
It is.
Each perspective offers valuable insights. And it's likely a combination of all three.
A combination.
That truly explains the complexities of this era.
Exactly. And for our UPSC aspirants? This multifaceted understanding is key.
It is.
You'll be analyzing historical events, writing essays, formulating arguments. This deep dive has given you the tools to do just that.
Absolutely.
To see beyond simple explanations and grapple with the nuances of international relations.
It's about recognizing those recurring themes.
Yeah.
Power dynamics, ideology, the role of human perception, and applying them to different historical contexts. The Cold War is a fantastic case study.
It is.
But the insights you gain from it can be applied to countless other situations.
It's like you said earlier. The Cold War might be over. But the forces that shaped it are still very much alive.
They are.
So as you continue your studies, and for all of our listeners out there navigating this complex world, I think the most important takeaway from this deep dive is this.
Okay, what is it?
Don't accept simple answers.
All right.
Keep asking questions.
Keep asking questions.
Keep challenging assumptions.
Challenge those assumptions.
And keep learning from history. Because it has a lot to teach us about the present and the future.
Well said. Curiosity and critical thinking
Yes.
are your greatest assets.
They are?
Whether you're preparing for the UPSC
All right.
or just trying to make sense of the world around you.
And hey, if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity,
yeah,
don't forget to like and subscribe for more thought-provoking explorations.
More deep dives.
We're here to help you navigate the complexities of history, politics,
Right.
and, well, everything in between.
Everything.
Until next time, keep diving.